August 10th, 258 Anno Domini. The air is thick with heat and smoke. In the center of a Roman square, an iron grill glows above a bed of burning embers. A man is being prepared for execution, stripped, bound, and stretched across the metal bars. The crowd presses in, silent, breathless, waiting for the screams. The condemned is a young deacon of the Church of Rome. His name is Lawrence. His wrists are chained, his limbs secured so tightly he cannot flinch, but his face betrays no panic, no fear, only a strange, steady calm, as though this moment had already happened in his mind and he had made peace with it long ago. Flames flicker beneath him. The embers are stoked. The metal begins to glow, red hot. The executioners know their craft well. This is not a fire built to kill quickly. It is measured, controlled, designed for slow, deliberate agony. The heat should already be unbearable, but Lawrence does not cry out. Instead, a silence settles. The crowd, Romans of every class, some drawn by morbid curiosity, others by whispered tales of this man's defiance, watches, transfixed. Their eyes dart from the rising smoke to the expression on Lawrence's face. It does not twist in agony. It does not shatter. It seems impossibly serene. A soldier hesitates. The prefect, seated in a carved wooden chair at the edge of the square, narrows his eyes, perhaps suspecting some trick. What kind of man does not scream on the grill? Then Lawrence speaks. His voice cuts clean through the smoke and tension. "You can turn me over," he says to his executioner. "This side is already roasted." There is a beat of stunned silence. Then a wave of gasps rolls through the crowd. Some recoil as if struck. Others laugh, not in mockery, but in disbelief, nervous, shaken, moved. The executioner stands frozen. The prefect scowls, but even he cannot hide a flicker of awe. The joke is not born of madness. It is the weapon of a man who has already won, a man whose body is being destroyed, but whose spirit has stepped beyond reach. In that moment, the grill is no longer an instrument of torture. It becomes a stage, and Lawrence owns it completely. Who is this man who jokes in the fire, who greets his death not with terror, but with wit? His name will echo through history, Lawrence of Huesca, Archdeacon of the Church of Rome. This moment, his calm, his courage, his final words will immortalize him as one of Christianity's most revered martyrs. But to understand how he reached this moment, how a deacon became a legend, we must step back before the fire, before the grill, before the prefect's fury. We must return to Hispania, to the boy named Laurentius and the path that would lead him to martyrdom. Lawrence was born around the year 225 in Huesca, a modest town in the Roman province of Hispania Tarraconensis, modern-day Spain. The empire was vast, powerful, and pagan, but within the walls of his Christian household, another allegiance quietly took root. From an early age, Lawrence showed not just piety, but conviction, a faith that was not ornamental but lived. As a youth, he traveled to Caesar Augusta, today's Zaragoza, to pursue theological studies. There, fate introduced him to a man who would change his life, and ultimately share in his death, the future Pope Sixtus II. The two formed a deep spiritual bond, mentor and disciple, bishop and deacon. They studied together, prayed together, envisioned a church strong enough to survive an empire's wrath. When Sixtus was called to Rome, Lawrence followed. It was a time of tension. Emperors changed swiftly, and Christianity was increasingly seen not as a sect, but as a threat. Yet in 257, when Sixtus ascended to the papacy, he appointed Lawrence as Archdeacon of Rome, the highest rank among the 7 deacons. He was not yet 30. It was no ceremonial role. Lawrence managed the church's wealth, cared for the poor, and protected its sacred vessels. In the shadows of catacombs and behind guarded doors, he became the steward of both treasure and truth. But the timing was cruel. Just as Lawrence rose to prominence, Rome turned its full fury on the church. His loyalty would soon be tested in fire. In 257 AD, Emperor Valerian issued an edict that would ignite one of the fiercest persecutions in Roman history. The message was clear. Bishops, priests, and deacons were to offer public sacrifice to the Roman gods or face banishment. The church in Rome, already under surveillance, felt the noose tighten. The following year, the pressure turned to blood. A second edict struck like a blade. This time there would be no exile. Christian leaders who refused to renounce their faith would be executed on the spot. Their property would be confiscated, their writings destroyed. Rome, uneasy with the church's growing influence, had decided to crush it. On August 6, 258, soldiers stormed the catacombs of Praetextatus during a clandestine liturgy. Pope Sixtus II was seized mid-rite, along with 4 of his deacons. They were dragged above ground and summarily beheaded. Word of the execution spread like wildfire. Lawrence heard it almost immediately. He rushed to the site, desperate to reach his mentor. According to tradition, he met Sixtus as he was being led to die and cried out, "Where are you going, Father, without your son? Where are you going, holy priest, without your deacon?" Sixtus turned, bloodied but composed. "I do not leave you, my son," he replied. "I merely go before you. In 3 days you will follow." 3 days. That was all the time Lawrence had left. Not to escape, but to prepare. The empire was watching, and Lawrence was next. The prefect of Rome, emboldened by the emperor's decree and aware of Lawrence's position as archdeacon, saw an opportunity. Lawrence was not just a churchman. He was the keeper of its wealth. Gold, silver, sacred vessels, documents, land deeds. The prefect wanted it all. He summoned Lawrence and gave him an ultimatum. Within 3 days, he was to surrender the church's treasures to the Roman authorities. There would be no negotiations, no mercy. To refuse was to invite death. Lawrence accepted the demand, but not as the prefect intended. Instead of gathering coins and artifacts, he moved swiftly through the streets and alleys of Rome, distributing everything of value to the poor. Widows, orphans, the sick, the crippled, those whom society discarded became the unlikely stewards of the church's wealth. Lawrence was not hiding the treasure. He was redefining it. On the 3rd day, he returned to the prefect, not alone, but surrounded by a crowd of beggars, the diseased, the blind, and broken. Stretching out his hand, he declared, "Behold, the treasure of the church." The prefect was livid. He had expected gold chalices, not lepers. He saw Lawrence's gesture not as defiance, but mockery, a public insult that demanded brutal punishment. Lawrence did not flinch. To him, this was truth made visible. The riches of Christ were not hidden in vaults. They stood before them, human and holy. He had offered the empire its answer. Now he would pay the price. The sentence was death, slow, public, unforgettable. The prefect, humiliated by Lawrence's defiance, ordered a punishment designed not just to kill, but to break the man before all of Rome. He would be roasted alive on an iron grill, cooked by degrees, consumed inch by inch. The executioners built the fire with cruel care. Dry wood soaked in oil, slow-burning embers, iron bars heated until they shimmered. Lawrence was stripped and bound flat against the grill. The pain began the moment his skin met the metal. Muscles contracted, skin cracked, the scent of burning flesh rose in waves. But from Lawrence, no cries, no pleas. According to tradition, what came instead was light. Witnesses claimed his face shone with an unnatural brightness. His body exuded a fragrance not of death, but of incense. Some Roman officials in the crowd, including senators, were said to be so struck by the sight that their hearts stirred toward the faith they had come to destroy. Then, amid the flames came the voice, calm, clear, and startling. "Turn me over," Lawrence said. "This side is already roasted." Laughter rippled through the stunned crowd, confused, involuntary, disarmed. In the moment of his agony, Lawrence had triumphed. The joke was not despair. It was victory, a final act of freedom in the face of imperial power. Some historians doubt the method, suspecting he was beheaded like the others. But the Church remembers the grill. Because it wasn't just torture, it was transformation. When the flames were finally extinguished and the crowd dispersed, Lawrence's charred body was quietly retrieved by fellow Christians. Risking their lives, they carried him to a burial site along the Via Tiburtina, a cemetery hidden beyond the city walls. There, in secret and sorrow, they laid him to rest. But Rome did not forget. Less than a century later, when Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, a basilica was raised over Lawrence's tomb, first humble, then expanded into what would become the Basilica of San Lorenzo fuori le Mura, one of the 7 great pilgrimage churches of Rome. His legacy stretched far beyond the city where he died. In Spain, his homeland, devotion to the saint inspired the construction of El Escorial, the massive monastery palace built by King Philip II. Shaped like a gridiron in honor of Lawrence's martyrdom, it stood as a monument to both suffering and spiritual triumph. Artists immortalized him, Fra Angelico, Titian, Rubens, all drawn to that impossible moment of the grill. In fire, Lawrence became not ash, but symbol, a life burned into eternity. What makes Lawrence's martyrdom so enduring is not only the brutality of his death, but the manner in which he embraced it. To joke while being burned alive is not merely rare, it seems impossible. And yet, this impossibility is what elevates his story beyond history into mystery. For centuries, theologians have wrestled with this moment. Was it human courage pushed to its limit? Or something greater, something divine working through flesh and fire? Saint Augustine, one of the great voices of the early church, saw no contradiction. His love for Christ burned so intensely, Augustine wrote, that he did not feel the external flames. For Augustine, Lawrence's serenity was not a denial of pain, but a sign that divine grace had overtaken him completely. The fire of the Spirit outshone the fire of the grill. To later generations, Lawrence became a symbol of suffering transformed, pain endured not with stoicism, but with love. His act was not resistance alone, it was testimony. By declaring that the poor were the church's treasure and then submitting to the flames with joy, he preached a final sermon more powerful than any words from a pulpit. Some have questioned the historical accuracy of the grill, suggesting it may have been a later embellishment. But for the Church, the symbol holds because it speaks to a deeper truth, that holiness does not always look like escape, it sometimes looks like endurance, and that a man consumed by fire can still illuminate the world. In Lawrence's martyrdom, Christians saw not defeat but revelation. A soul that did not just survive pain, but transfigured it, a death that it did not silence faith but made it immortal. Lawrence's name has never faded. It echoes in cathedrals, libraries, kitchens, and skies. Catholic tradition honors him as the patron saint of the poor, those he defended to the end. He is also venerated by librarians for the treasures of knowledge he protected, and, fittingly, with a touch of divine irony, by cooks. His feast day, August 10th, is marked not only by prayers but by light. Each year, around this date, the night sky fills with falling stars, the Perseid meteor shower, known across Europe as the Tears of St. Lawrence, or as if the embers that consumed him return each year as fire from heaven, silent, brilliant reminders of sacrifice and transcendence. In a world that often seeks comfort above all else, Lawrence's story stands firm, not as a tale of death, but of meaning, of a man who faced the flames and smiled, and in that smile dared to show the world where true treasure lies,